Introducing Addy, a game-changing AI maintenance bot for property management. Addy can, in any language, triage and data capture every maintenance issue, with full voice version coming soon. Addy has learned from over 850,000 reactive maintenance issues carried out by AddyUvo, the leading maintenance call handling service. To sign up for updates and our next testing cohort, go to adiuvo.org.uk/ADI.
Welcome back to Season 12 of the Propcast. I'm your host, Louisa Dickins, and this season we'll be discussing all things smart buildings and the digital future. Today on the Eyes in the Sky podcast episode, I spoke to Mike Winn, CEO and co-founder of DroneDeploy, and David Thirlwell, Director of Operational Excellence at Stiles Construction. Mike shares with us how DroneDeploy has secured over 5,000 customers worldwide and has grown his TAM across oil, gas and construction. Despite being around since 1917, drones have only gained prominence and become widely accessible within the past 7 years, which is truly remarkable. Who wouldn't want a bird's eye view of their job site with structured, detailed data to allow people to work safely and effectively? David shares with us how difficult it is to find the right solution to a problem, but when you find it, the power technology can have is truly incredible. It is clear that there's a huge appetite for technology despite there being a chopping market and budget cuts. But it's all about finding the right businesses who are forward-thinking. Those businesses will be the ones to thrive in 2023 and years to come. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending where you are listening in from. Obviously, welcome back to the Propcast. Today's podcast is on eyes in the sky and what is the value of them. So you've probably guessed we're going to be talking all about drones, which we have yet done in, this is the 12th season. So yeah, a brand new topic. And today we're joined by the CEO and founder of DroneDeploy, Mike Winn, and David Thirlwell, who's Director of Operational Excellence at Stiles Construction. So welcome to the show, Mike and David.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
And for those not familiar with DroneDeploy, it is the leading AI reality capture platform. During this episode, we'll be finding out why it's used in over 50% of the world's largest general contractors, oil and gas and clean energy companies, to answer questions about the conditions of their assets and sites. Mike will be sharing some success stories of how he has adapted his product across different industries and scaled globally, as well as diving into why reliability and trust are core to any product and his very successful business. And we've also got David here, who's one of DroneDeploy's customers. And David has been using 3D modeling to better describe our built environment for some time. He's got 17 years experience using BIM and VDC in commercial construction, including roles in architecture, engineering, construction management, as well as working for a large national specialty contractor. As David has been upskilling himself throughout his career, he's going to be sharing with us, the importance of technology, which obviously helps with the proper adoption and integration. And obviously a big part is about the product and making sure that it's ready, which obviously Mike is going to be talking to us about. But David's going to be saying it's also about the end user and how they utilize it and get it to grow throughout a business. So I'm really looking forward to the two obviously different sides, I guess, of opinion on this. So without further ado, let's start the show. And Mike, why don't you kickstart us with, the story behind DroneDeploy, tell the audience a bit about you, how you've obviously grown across different assets, and now you've got an incredible TAM for your product, which is what every founder listening and probably wants to get themselves.
That's a lot of questions. Let me try and answer that in 90 seconds. Yes, I'm Mike, and I'm one of the founders of DroneDeploy. There's three of us. We all started in South Africa. And so the origin story was actually around anti-poaching. So this is back in 2010. We were looking at trying to help all the poaching problems in South Africa at the time, and still today, about 3 rhinos are killed every day. And the problem is there's a huge tracts of land with very few people keeping an eye on them. I was exposed to flying RC helicopters at the time and attaching cameras, and the question became, okay, why don't we just take these out into the field and enable the park rangers to use these? The problem being that before you could get anyone to use the drone, you first had to teach them how to use a Windows laptop. When you got the drone in the air, if it kept flying, you only got the data down to one place. And the data was just a video stream. It wasn't actually any insights. And so we started tackling that problem and understanding it. And we figured out it was actually a very hard problem to solve, but it did get us into the world of knowing that people would find it very valuable to get a bird's eye view of their job site, to be able to get that data whenever they wanted, right at the moment they wanted, and to not just get it as a photo, but actually structured data that they could share. And so we started the company DroneDeploy as it is now in 2013. It's still solving those problems today. It's got an even bigger remit, but really we have a vision that every job site should be digitized. And if we can do that, we will enable all the workers to really understand what's going on and help them do their job more safely and more effectively.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And David, let's bring you in here because your title is Director of Operational Excellence. When we first had our call, I was asking you, what does that exactly mean? So if you could share the audience, what is that? And also a bit about Stiles Construction for our audience who might not be aware, who aren't based in the US.
Yeah, so Stiles is, design, construct, and manage. So we are an umbrella corporation that does all those different parts, and I'm in the construction department. So my focus is on, basically, in a nutshell, continuous improvement. So what that is about, and operational excellence is about, is basically keeping your eyes and ears open to opportunities to make things more efficient, to optimize processes, to look for risk and seek out problems or seek out solutions for the problems as well as new problems to solve. So just really more than anything, keeping your eyes and ears open and communicating with everyone and identifying when solutions come along, which is really the most challenging part, is to connect solutions with problems. I always think of it as like a bunch of dots, problems floating in space that you're looking for connections between those dots, ways to connect the problems and solutions together. A little bit about my background. My dad had a GC license and just was a real handy guy. And, he applied it to everything. He loved to plan. He built his own houses. That's pretty much all he used his GC license for, but it kind of got me started. And I, in high school, I got exposed to the first robotics competition, paired up with NASA. Autodesk sponsored it. I got on the animation teams for the robotics competition. So I got a pass out to NASA because I grew up right in the shadow of the space program. So once I got access out there, I got direct access to those guys that back in the 90s, that was like the pinnacle of 3D animation, was all the NASA satellites and rockets and things like that. So there were like two guys that ran the whole thing. They were just master animators. And like I said, Autodesk sponsored it with 3D Studio Max 1.0. So I went on from there to do some AE firms, went to UF, to University of Florida for the architecture program. Went to work for architecture, and it was not my thing, for sure. It wasn't hands-on enough. It didn't have enough technology integration. Ironically, the firm I went to work for used Revit just right before I got there, and I went back to architectural desktop. And then I went to work for some internships with engineering firms out at the Cape Canaveral, working on a couple rocket launch pads. My very first project was redlining a gantry crane for a rocket assembly building. And then my first design project was a cable room on one of the rocket gantries out there. So that was pretty fun. It was really a unique experience, especially driving out there with my hot red sports car on in NASA property and the Air Force Station, pretty much right at the end of the Cold War. So that was pretty unique. But I got laid off the architecture firm after 9/11 happened, and all of our projects went on indefinite hold. So a friend of mine pulled me into construction management, and I've been happy, never looked back. The firm that ended up hiring me after my master's program kind of walked me right into BIM and VDC. They had read a paper by the AGC, and it was a perfect fit. I was through grad school, I would kind of work for a scientific engineering firm where I pretty much use Rhino 3D to essentially do exactly what I do now, just in much smaller platform.
And how did you come across DroneDeploy? Just before we hopped on, you were saying how DroneDeploy is used throughout various projects at Stiles. So it's obviously doing a good job. So can you share a bit with our audience about that?
Yeah, so my first exposure to drones was kind of sometimes technologies come along and they're the hottest new thing and they look like a lot of fun. Everybody calls them toys until they have an actual application. So I was on a large rail station project down in Miami, and I was 3D scanning embed plates actually with one of Mike's colleagues, Philip Lorenzo, was helping me solve the problems with 3D scanning this massive project. It's, I think, 10 city blocks. And my colleague had bought a drone, and he was all about flying the drone. We were doing a 3D scanning advertisement for the 3D scanning company. And we used the drone to shoot some video for it, but also did some orthomosaics of the train station, brought those orthomosaics into our models, and it was just like, never look back. I mean, that was a game changer for me. Before that, there was no real way to capture a site. The best you could do was an aerial photograph, or download or use captures from Google Earth or something like that, which was always out of date. So yeah, it kind of fell in my lap. And then at Stiles, this is actually the second time I've worked for Stiles. And the first time I was here, I was coordinating the building that I'm in right now, our headquarters office building, and has a sister project that was also Stiles, another 30-story tower or 25-story tower next door. And I was working with the architectural team, the design team for quite a while, and then our construction teams after that started to plan both projects and the whole site around them. And when we started coming out of the ground, I did our first official orthomosaic of the whole site and found a big problem on the apartment building next door. It caught it so fast, and we were able to resolve that problem and saved an untold amount of money, fixing it while it was in the ground.
That's good. And Mike, you work with the 20 largest sort of GCs out there, which is a pretty good customer basis. What are there any other sort of stories you want to share about how you've actually got these sort of customers on? Obviously, you've got David, who's a very happy customer here, but how was it winning your first customer, and then you must have had to adapt your product because every GC or oil and gas company, they're all different. I know a drone simply is reality capture, but I'm sure I'm just making it pretty basic. So how did you manage to get this fairly large customer base?
We have about 5,000 customers, everything from individual users, but mostly focused on very large enterprises. And so we have, fun status, we have 18 of the top 20 GCs using our product. All of the biggest seed companies, or 5 of the top 10 oil and gas companies, the biggest solar companies. A lot of people use it. And I think the interesting thing is that the product, despite working across these different verticals, the basics are the same, and it's quite like a easy to understand product in the sense that David was saying. You get an orthomosaic, which is basically a top-down view of your job site, and you can tell so much from that. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, then an orthomosaic is the next order of magnitude on top of that, because you can measure every element. You can imagine for a job site, used to walking around and seeing everything at eye level. But if you have a giant job site, as you're saying, like a city block, there's no way an individual worker can understand his whole construction site. And you don't just want to be able to understand every corner. You also want to know what happened last week and be able to compare over time. You want to be able to see through the walls and know that, hey, look, before we put down the flooring, this is this is where all the, I don't know if in the walls where all the mechanical electrical is. And you can see all of this because you can have a photo audit of everything that's happened on your job sites. And it's basically, the product is, at the most basic level, it's Google Earth and it's Street View for your job site as you captured it potentially today, all in massively high resolution, up to a millimeter of resolution, so you can see hairline cracks, and we can position each crack to within an inch. So just a highly accurate current version of Google Earth that we can do a ton in terms of AI analysis on top of it. So you can go very deep, but the basics, anyone can go look at literally their house and be like, oh wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that we had a chip in the tiles on the roof. So it's a very easy product to get into. And just like David said, how does our product spread? It's because one personal job site shows another person. That's really the core of what's helped us build our company, is people like David and Philip that have used the technology and just shown up here, look at this problems we have. Let's solve it together.
Hi, I'm Xander Geronimos, Head of Business Development and Strategic Partnerships at Metaprop. the New York-based venture capital firm that has been at the forefront of the PropTech industry since 2015. In early September, we will launch the Global PropTech Confidence Index, sponsored by PwC, which serves as a biannual barometer for the health of the real estate technology industry. Metaprop also publishes a monthly newsletter that covers all things PropTech, from industry news, upcoming events, recent financings, job spotlights, and more. Subscribe at the footer of our website, metaprop.vc.
You also mentioned when we spoke, God, I think we spoke back, must have been early this year, like honestly in January or something. You mentioned some of your earliest adopters are now heads of business, and it's important of looking after your clients, ensuring that you're nurturing them, listening to, I'm sure DroneDeploy is perfect most of the time, but I guess listening to their response and saying, hi, can you fiddle around with this and upgrade it or refocus it? Can you share with us like maybe like an example of, a customer which you sort of grown and developed, and whether or not it's in construction, it could be in oil and gas, or you mentioned solar construction, which I don't know sort of too much about. I want to learn more, but would love to hear a bit of a story behind that.
So solar construction, I would say this is one of my most exciting stats in the world right now, is that there's more solar power being deployed than all forms of other energy in the world being built right now. It's just growing massively, and these sites are ginormous, literally thousands of acres. And here's an example, which is kind of fun from right now, is we had a customer come to us that was doing solar construction management, and they really needed a better way to understand progress. And historically, progress has been understood by walking around and counting the number of racks, piles, and modules that were being installed per block. And I think the site had 600,000 modules being installed. And so every week they're walking around understanding their progress and saying, hey, can we do this a better way? There are robots. Can't these robots count? And so the base product that we have, of course, is you can fly a robot, you click a button, the robot flies, it will cover the ground, create a map, and it'll be very highly accurate, very high resolution. But what they wanted wasn't a map or a 3D model. They wanted how many modules, how many piles have been installed. So we were able to leverage our machine learning architecture and just build a tool to count those things. And so now we get every week a new report based off the latest drone data of exactly how many piles, racks, and modules have been installed on this job site. And those people don't need to go and walk around outside in the heat anymore. They can go just understand the data. They might want to go and ground truth it if they really want to. And they can focus their time on something that creates more value.
You mentioned about, I guess, the assumption is, and obviously Mike, obviously extremely successful and smart founder, but expecting people to understand the data you're giving them or the technology. Does that always happen? Like, obviously, my business is very much focused on the built environment. Some of my, could be web consultancy, a GC, whatever it could be. But a big problem is the lack of understanding of technology, how to use it, how to understand the data. Obviously, David, you shared earlier that you've been, early adopter. You've tried different technologies, but that's not always the case. And that's, a fundamental issue in, most industries. Mike, what's been your experience of this?
It's funny that we almost have the opposite, where if I were to present David a 3D model of one of their job sites, he would understand the data way more than I could. Because I'm not a construction engineer. I don't have that background. I don't know that site specifically. And so that's where the light bulb always goes off, is if we were able as our company to show, in the sales process, just show somebody their own job site, and they'll be able to capture so many insights from seeing their job site that we couldn't understand. And so it's our job actually as a technology provider to go and talk to them and say, hey, what do you see? How do we help you see that more easily? And our whole kind of product development process is architected around just going out to customers and understanding what they can see, because, they're the experts in their job sites. They're the experts in their field. And they can do so much with just the basics of reality capture, which is taking imagery or collecting data about their job sites, that it's actually kind of surprising just how many insights can be captured with one 3D model of a job site. David, it'll be interesting to hear from your perspective, like, on the other side of that.
Yeah, well, we've found DroneDeploy actually be a great partner in bringing new tools to the table for us. One of the big things early on was we had a few clients looking for vertical orthomosaics of the building facades. So I know it's been out for a long time now, but that was one of the things we kind of suggested and pushed along for a while. I think Oscar used to work here and was really pushing for that on one of his projects. And it was nice to see that come to market. I haven't specifically had a need for the vertical ortho, but I know a lot of people are making good use of it. But yeah, I know, I don't know how much I can reveal, but I know some of the stuff we're looking at with orthomosaics of pre-poured decks and AI is auto-identifying problems that, one of our biggest concerns with pouring concrete is once you pour it, it's really hard to deal with mistakes. So using AI to pre-identify sleeves in the wrong place and out of tolerance or missing altogether, that's a huge game changer for our industry because it's just so expensive to fix afterwards. Not just because actually drilling the hole is the problem, but there may be stuff in your way. We have post-tension cables in most of our decks, so you can't. It's very, very costly to deal with those if they're in conflict, which they very often are. It's not a explicit science on how they lay those cables. I mean, it is, but they can vary quite a bit from floor to floor. So it's an interesting.
That'd be actually useful just to get a sense of value there. So you feel free to talk about that product, but can you just share what's the value of the imagery in that kind of context?
Well, for a decade now, we've been utilizing total stations to go out there and verify sleeves and decks so that we don't get them wrong. And I'd say it's probably the number one goal for BIM and VDC coordination is to get the sleeves in the right place, just because it's not only so expensive to fix, but it's also a huge problem for the schedule. And, my job is primarily about risk mitigation. So our biggest risk exposure on projects is schedule. If we lose time on projects, everything's so optimized now that, especially with lead times of different products getting hugely longer these days, schedule is very much our risk exposure area. And sleeves probably represents the largest exposure from above ground, because if we get those holes in the wrong place, then they can't install and they can't keep up with the schedule. So, and then you don't always find it right away. A lot of times you find it in framing, and by the time you're in framing, you have bigger problems.
Who's responsible for that mistake then, that very expensive mistake?
It could be anybody, anybody involved. So it could be straight up design problems. It could be somebody placed the sleeve wrong. Somebody kicked the sleeve. Somebody just forgot it altogether or just put it in the wrong place.
What happened to that person?
Usually it's a laborer and not really much happens. If it happens deck after deck, I'm sure they would probably lose their job.
This is not for exactly the same use case, but I was talking to another company that they're building a mega project. You're just talking about the Middle East. There's a mega project in the Middle East, and one of the structural support beams was a few centimeters shorter than it should have been. And they caught it, and it's actually saved them $1.5 million by catching it early before the structure had gone up than if they had to retrofit the structural support. So it can be massively valuable.
Well, I think also when it's like construction that's famously sort of low margins, it's pretty important to get these things right. And then going back to that, then David, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you. You're obviously very open-minded to technology. Right now we're in a choppier economy. Budgets are being cut. I know construction is still happening everywhere. Before we hopped on audience, we were talking about everything that's happening in the Middle East, which is super exciting. Different cities being built, neon the line and everything like that. And I guess it changes from the US to APAC to Europe. What's the appetite for trialing new technologies? Obviously, Mike's already got the monopoly, it sounds like, in the drone department. But what are you sort of hearing in the market from your other sort of competitors? Are you being told, actually spend a bit of money on technology? Or are you saying, what, let's keep to what we're doing now. Let's slow it down. Let's mitigate risk.
Well, that was one of my big reasons for recently returning to Stiles was their attitude towards technology is very receptive. They're an open book on it too, so they don't hold any cards behind their back. They want me to go out there and figure out what works best to solve our problems in the most efficient way. So, getting the instruments it can look like a lot of money on paper, but when you consider what you can do with them, whether it's the drones, the 360 cameras, the 3D scanner, the total station, it's a little bit difficult to stomach at first glance for companies, because it's, like I said, it's a lot of money. That's a $40,000 instrument there. And then a typical 3D scanner, you're looking from anywhere from 40 to 100,000. And I don't use them all the time. I mean, I'm not out there in the field using that all the time, or neither are the guys working for me. So it's not like a surveyor that would be using that on a daily basis, so it can be a little bit tough for companies to look at that big ticket item and bite that off. But when we use it, we're very directed in our application of it. I'm not going out and laying out just anything or verifying just anything. We go out there and we verify things that we think there's real risk exposure on. And so I might use that, 5-6 times a year. But it's big stuff that we're going out there to do. And then for instance, just last Thursday, I went out to a site down the road here on Las Olas. It's 2 floors underground. The superintendent called me out. He said, "Hey, we have a 3D scanner. Can you come out here and just verify that this big excavation is within tolerance?" So I scanned it in a couple hours, brought it back, processed it in a few days, and did an analysis. And there are, we heat mapped the excavation walls to make sure that the planned project fits in there. And there are definite busts in there, so it's probably really easy to resolve right now. But if they start building and go too far along, it could be really hard to resolve some of those areas. And, from a risk standpoint on that, you definitely don't want to get into boxing yourself into a solution that isn't the best, So if you find problems early, that equipment might have cost a lot. Maybe my time costs a lot, but it's nothing compared to finding that problem early and then getting to weigh out the best solutions to resolve the problem, rather than boxing yourself in and then all of a sudden everybody's scrambling to come up with a solution that could work. It's one thing to choose the best of the bunch. It's another thing to choose, the only one that's going to work for you.
Yeah, for sure. Mike, you've been nodding your head throughout what David's sort of saying. I guess this can probably tie in quite nicely to talking about some of the core values in your business, which is obviously building trust and reliability of your product. Can you share, we're coming to the end of the podcast, I think a big thing, what founders want to hear as well is, how the importance of culture, it's all about retaining people, but at the end of the day, you want to give your customers the best product, make the most amount of money and grow it and have a great reputation of the business. So what can you sort of share with the audience about how you've gone about this and why trust and reliability is so important?
So we have 3 values at the company, and they're make it happen to start, then build trust and simplify. And we kind of think of them as all 3 together. You got to make it happen in a way that builds trust and simplifies. And they're all intention to each other, because making it happen is just getting shit done. Excuse me. And often that's to the expense of simplify. And so there's a kind of a healthy tension in them all. And that came about actually as 3 founders. We had our first attempt at having a value committee kind of in the company, and that didn't really get to the core. It was kind of, they were core of who we were. And we kind of sat down and decided, okay, what are the 3 things we think are most important for our customers? And the first thing is actually delivering, making stuff happen. And that's in many different ways. Building a product that works, but also helping them in the field, being there on the phone if something goes wrong. Build trust in you, that's speaking to reliability, like the stuff needs to work, which is actually a harder thing than you'd think in the robotics and AI world. And that's a very long journey as we get more 9s going along. And then the last thing is simplify. And that's a big thing for us as a company, is for us to really build a tool that scales. It needs to work for everyone. And I think that's kind of been a competitive advantage for us, is really how do we just simplify the stuff down to the essence, to the core. And the more we can remove steps in these processes, the more automated they also get. And so how do we get to a world where every day a person arrives on a job site and they just have the data they need? And that's because a drone took off on a schedule at 8 a.m. From a box. It's captured the data, processed the data, and didn't just deliver a 3D model, it delivered some insights of, hey, I think there's this much progress is being made. There's a quality issue here. And so that's kind of the future we're trying to build towards, and that's kind of intertwines with the values we have as a company.
Talking about the future, have you got anything you want to share with us and the audience? What's the next sort of big plans for DroneDeploy then? Is there any sort of further growth? You're pretty global at the moment. Anything about your product you want to share with the audience?
We are a very product-focused company with 3 computer science-related people. I used to work at Google where the product sold itself, and so like, hey, how do we build a product that just sells itself? And we can be there to support it. So we continue to invest very heavily in products, and there's 3 things that our customers really told us they care about. The first is they want all the data in one place, to unify, to bring the aerial data together with the ground data across all the types of data they capture. And that's going to democratize the data to more people, make it easy to use, but also enable us to extract more insights. And so that's the next thing, the AI revolution. There's lots of hype, and many things are probably overhyped, but there's actually something really real here. We're seeing it being a lot easier to build tools that are better, more generalizable, that are cheaper for us to build. So you're going to see a lot of movement there as we transition from showing people 3D models and optimization photos to here's how much progress you've made. And so you're going to see some exciting stuff there. And the last bit is automation. We are a drone company, a robotics company. How do we get these robots to actually be fully automated? Not need the babysitter, which is one of us going out there to press the button. And 2023 is actually a year where things are really changing. The ground robots are becoming mature enough. We used to have ground robotic software as well to go and walk around a job site to capture data. In fact, I just listened to some of the Turner and Versatile podcast. Turner's using, they've got a good case study on our website where laser scanning is taking them 90% less time using a robot. And that's on the ground. In the air, you can now buy drones that fly on docks for $30,000. And that's not a small amount to pay, but that's less than a turtle station that's behind you there. And so we're going to see that's just at the beginning of the ramp of going across job sites. And we think every big job site will in the next 5 years have a drone in the box.
Before we went on audience, I was trying to find some fun facts about drones. I had a bit of spare time this morning, and we were talking about the price of them. I found out the most expensive passenger carrying drone is the China-made EHang 184, and that cost $300,000, which is slightly more expensive than what we've just been talking about. But I thought that might be a nice little fun fact for us to end on. What I will say is those who want to explore this product, you should definitely check out DroneDeploy's website. Obviously, we've heard great reviews to one of the most loyal customers here as well. And they definitely would love to hear from you. So I would love to thank both my guests for joining the podcast today. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you after the show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.